I'm going to be honest with you. When I was growing up, I didn't love myself. I didn't learn to love myself. Loving yourself is such a key, critical, important skill to develop. And I do recognize it as a skill. It's something that you have to learn to do. When you are growing up in an environment that is highly critical, highly judgmental, when someone is pointing out every single thing that's wrong with you and how you live and what you do and where you do it and how you do it, it becomes very easy to loathe yourself. And that has consequences. And not just consequences of like depression and anxiety, but it has consequences with the way that you treat yourself. It has consequences with the way that you make choices. It has consequences with the way that you engage with other people. And it has consequences with the way you eat. It has consequences with just about everything. It's important that we learn to love thyself. And I think it's important that we learn the difference between self-love and self-care. Like I talk about this very, very often in my professional work, like how important it is to develop the skill of loving yourself. Like that's just as much as a skill as it is of loving a friend, loving a partner, loving someone, like it's something that is critically important and not enough people do it. So that's what the focus is going to be on the podcast this week. And we're going to start today. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. When you struggle to love yourself, you just don't treat yourself well. Because why would you? You know what I mean? Like how you treat someone, including yourself, is very much guided by how you feel towards that thing or towards that someone. When you love yourself, you sacrifice for yourself. When you love yourself, you give yourself grace. When you love yourself, you give yourself gifts. And I don't just mean physical gifts, but I mean you give yourself the gift of hope and pleasure, positive thought. You have an affinity for yourself. And I think sometimes we talk about self-love, people compare it to self-care. And self-care is how you treat yourself. And self-love is why, right? Self-care is, I'm going to take myself on a vacation. I'm going to go to the Bahamas, or I'm going to go to the beach, or I'm going to do whatever. But the self-love is why you do those things, right? The self-love is what's behind the decision to do those things. And I'll tell you a quick story and exactly what I mean. And I told you, I've been very upfront. I talk about it often. The kind of environment I grew up in was not an environment that was conducive to learn to love yourself. And I did not. I don't think I studied as hard as I otherwise would have. I don't think I treated my body well. I don't think I made the greatest decisions. And I decided to work on this. And I was, at some point, became very aware that this was happening. And I decided to work on this. And I decided to, quite frankly, learn to love myself more and focus on how to be a better person to me, how to be a better person to who I am, how to grow and evolve. And I could remember, I was in college at the time. I was an undergrad. I was 19 years old. And I was like, okay, I don't love myself because I don't view myself in a positive way. My dad had told me, and this is the honest thing that was going on in my head. My dad had told me multiple times that I was a loser and I was never going to be anything else, and you're not worth anything. You're never going to be better than me. That was something that he said very frequently, which I recognize now is a terrible thing to say to your child, but he would say that. You're never going to be better than me. And this particular semester, a professor had taken a liking to me and told me that they thought I was very bright. So I thought to myself, like, okay, who's right here? My dad's telling me I'm a loser and never going to amount to anything, and this professor seems to think that I have value and that I'm worth something. And the only way I could figure out which one was right, I thought, all right, so I'm going to try really hard this semester. And that was the first time I got straight A's. I got a 4.0 that semester. And then I realized, like, oh, I have worth and value. And that started the momentum that led to me loving myself and treating myself well. Because when you view yourself as having value and someone asks you to do something stupid, you're like, no, I'm not going to skip class today because I have value, I have worth, and I want to maximize that worth. But when you view yourself as not worthy and someone says, hey, let's go skip school today, yeah, why not? I don't have a future that I'm throwing away anyway, so I might as well do this thing. When your father tells you you're a loser, you're never going to amount to anything, you're never going to be better than him, and someone says, hey, let's skip school, you're like, why not? I'm not throwing away anything. I don't have a future worth any value. But then when you start loving yourself and realizing, like, I do have a future, I am worthwhile, I am important. Then when someone says, hey, let's skip class today, you're like, no. I've got a future that I got to protect, that I got to cherish, and I got to focus on. That's how important self-love is. So my question for you is, when did you learn to love yourself? And what changed? How did you change in the way you treated yourself and the way you did things that were a result of that self-love? One of the most beautiful things about love is when you have love for someone, you accept them as they are. Love usually leads to this thing that I like to call radical acceptance. Because no one is perfect, but when I love you, it's like I accept you and your flaws. I know you might run late. I know you might take a long time getting dressed. I know that you have this quirk or that quirk or whatever it is, and I accept you. I'm not asking you to change or be perfect. I'm accepting, just because I love you, that like this is the person that you are. And that's the basis of self-love, or the basis of love in general. Like, I know that you are this person. I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to be perfect. And I'm not judging you based upon how well you manage your flaws. I'm loving you because I decided to. I'm loving you because of the way you make me feel. I'm loving you because the way love makes me feel while I'm in contact with you. And I find myself, as I'm going over this topic this week, I find myself asking, like, how many people love themselves enough that they will give themselves the gift of radical acceptance? How many people out there judge themselves harshly because of their flaws, and they don't accept them, they hide them, and as a consequence, you're not really fully embracing love? And my guess is a lot of people are that way. And that's why I want to address it today. So my middle name is Eugene, and the majority of my life, I tried to hide that because I didn't like it. It sounded nerdy. I didn't think it was cool. I didn't want to be made fun of, and I tried to hide it. But when you love yourself, like, you embrace all of you, including a name that you might think is silly. Like the fact that I just said in front of a microphone that my middle name was Eugene. Like, there was once a time I was actively working to hide that. Like in school, like the teacher would have this booklet. Back when I was in school, it's all on computers now, but they had these booklets, and every student's like full name was there, and I was like, oh, I gotta make sure no one sees that. And it would drive me crazy. But even further than that, like, I have personality flaws just like everybody else does. Like, I'm very spontaneous, occasionally unorganized, and I procrastinate a lot. And I'm around a bunch of people, like my best friend Adam, who a lot of you guys have heard about on this podcast. He's incredibly organized, incredibly prompt, and is incredibly scheduled. And people look at him and they view that as like the ideal. Like, a real mature person should be organized and prompt and scheduled. So Elliott is something less than that because his strengths are spontaneity, or his flaws are spontaneity. He's incredibly disorganized and he procrastinates. And it took me a long time. And I would admire that in Adam, and I would be like, man, I should be more like that. People seem to think that I should be like that, so maybe people are right, and I should be more like that. And it took me a while to realize that these are actually my strengths. I'm spontaneous, which means I'm flexible and I can pivot and I can think and do things right in the moment. And yes, I procrastinate, but then I learned a lot of creative people tend to procrastinate because the pressure of a deadline sparks their creativity. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, so it's not me being flawed. It's just me understanding I'm different. And all of a sudden I wasn't hiding those things. All of a sudden I wasn't viewing myself in a negative way because I wasn't like these other people. I was like me. And it was like, holy cow, like, these are actually strengths. And it changed the way I viewed myself, and it changed the way I showed up, and it changed the way that I behaved and conducted myself. And I was like, oh wow, like, this is like a game changer. And the reason why I think this is so important is, how many of you have a trait that just because it's not common amongst other people, because the world looks at it in a particular way, you think it's a flaw that you need to fix, instead of understanding that's your magic. My spontaneity is my magic. Just so happens that Adam's scheduling is magic. But you've got to be you, and you've got to learn to accept the parts of you that you may have thought were flaws. They're actually your brilliance. So what I want you to do, I want you to look through your life. What are some things that you've previously thought of as flaws? Maybe the world has tried to tell you are flaws. But when you rethink about them, they're actually your strength. I can remember growing up, and for Christmas one year, and I don't know, I was maybe 11. I asked my parents for a pair of Air Jordans. Now at this time, Michael Jordan ruled the world. He was the king of all celebrities. He was the greatest basketball player to ever live. He was the most popular. Michael Jordan was the end-all be-all. And we didn't have a ton of money, so I couldn't get Jordans normally. But one year I just, aimed for the stars, and I asked my parents if I could have a pair of Air Jordans for Christmas. And they got them. This is what I can remember as my first kind of valuable item that I ever owned that was ever actually mine. It was a really, really big deal for me at the time. Really big deal. And I cherished them. When I would wear them, I would make sure not to step in any mud or any dirt. I wouldn't walk on any grass. I didn't want them dirty. Even though they were Air Jordans designed to play basketball, I wouldn't play basketball in them. When I got home after wearing them, I would wipe them off. I kept the shoebox. And every single night, I would prop them up on the shoebox because I cherished them. Because that's what you do when you love something. You cherish it. You take care of it. You honor it. And it's the same thing that we do with ourselves when we demonstrate and practice self-love. Except sometimes I think that we think self-love is like, positive self-talk or anything, but it's not. It's cherishing something. I'm not even talking about anybody else. I'll use myself as an example, but I didn't always cherish myself. When you cherish yourself, you don't just eat junk. You take care of your vessel. You don't just stay up all night. Like, you do things that honor who you are. That's how you know when you're practicing self-love. When you're taking care of yourself. When you're practicing the act of self-love, which is, I'm going to take care of me and my future and my life and my passions and my projects. I know that when I was younger, I did not cherish myself. I know that when I was younger, I did not love myself. So when my friends would say stupid things to me, like, hey, we're skipping school today. And I know I've shared this before, but that one day when I remember my friend found his dad's wine coolers. Let's skip school and go drink wine coolers. And I'd been beaten, that literally and figuratively, down so much that it's like, I don't even have a future that I'm throwing away. So why not? Like, why wouldn't I skip school? But at some point, I started to believe that I had a positive future ahead of me. I started to believe that there was something that I could dream for and about. I could live for and desire. At some point, I started to believe that I was worthwhile. And then you start treating yourself better. So when people say, hey man, let's go skip school, it's like, no, I can't. That's an act of cherishing yourself. Self-love is not just you, saying positive affirmations in the refrigerator, in the mirror. That's not self-love. It can't be a part of self-love. There's nothing wrong with saying positive affirmation in the mirror, but more than that, self-love is an act. It's an act. You could tell as a child that I cherished my Air Jordans simply by the way that I treated them, just by watching me. And I can tell as I watch people simply by the way they treat themselves, how much they love themselves, how much they cherish themselves, how much they believe in themselves and in their future. Simply by watching, simply by paying attention. Self-love is an act more than it is anything else. It's something that has action behind it, which makes it observable. It's not just emotion. It's an observable act. And if you love yourself, I want you to pay really close attention to how many acts you take that others can observe that are evidence of how much you love yourself. Not everybody gets to grow up in an environment where they feel an abundance of love and self-respect and support. A lot of people grow up in an environment where they are given the message that they are not worthy of love, where they don't have value, where they're not important and they're not made to feel important and feel prioritized. But I've been saying all week that the number one thing you can do to change your life immediately is to increase your level of self-love and self-value. So how do you do that? How do you do that when you come from an environment where you weren't taught to love yourself, and love almost felt like a foreign concept, where love felt challenging and difficult? How do you do that when you were given the repeated toxic message that love isn't something that you should value? Love isn't something that you were worthy of. Love is not something that you had access to readily. So I'm going to talk specifically about my journey, and then I'm going to give you guys a really important lesson here. Like, I don't know that I learned to love myself as easily or as readily as other people around me. I mean, my dad, it's interesting because my father played such a massive role in my mental health, and he was such a point of trauma to me. The way that he raised me and my two brothers, the way that he treated his wife, my mother, it's such a, it was a huge point in my life. Like, it really defined almost everything in my life. However, he would say, "I love you" a lot. But then he would also say things like, "You're a piece of shit. You're never going to amount to anything. You're not worthy. You're not valuable. You're not..." Like, he would overtly say these really harsh, crucial, and negative things. And it impacted me. It impacted me a great deal. I learned to not trust. I learned that love was conditional. And I learned difficult things. So where do you learn how to love yourself when you come from environments like this? And I'm going to say two things. The first thing is by observation, and the second thing is find people around you who are gifting you with love. And for me, both of those things happened in the same people, which was my best friend Kyle and his family. Growing up across the street from Kyle, it was really, really hard in my home. For a long time, I didn't think Kyle knew it. I mean, when you grow up in an environment like that, you hide it. Like, you work to hide it. Like, you don't want everybody to know. But eventually it was something that I knew Kyle knew about. I don't know that he knew how bad it was. To this day, I'm not sure he knows how bad it was. But I'm sure he knows it was bad. His parents treated me as if I was a son to them. They were loving, kind, caring, devoted. And I allowed myself to feel that. It felt unconditional. To this day, it still feels unconditional, to be honest. It felt good. It just felt like someone loves me for me. And the other thing that I was able to do is to observe the way that Kyle's dad treated Kyle's mother. And I remember overtly thinking, like, I want to be like that when I grow up instead of my father. My father would say that he wanted people to fear him. One day my mother said, "If you don't stop, your children are going to grow up afraid of you." And he said, "Good. I want them to fear me." I'm not sure my father ever really understood the difference between fear and respect. But Kyle's dad, no one feared him. And by the way, I mean that as a compliment. Like, he didn't scare you, but he commanded respect with the way that he treated people, his loyalty, his kindness, his generosity. Kyle's dad, he was just one of the best people that I ever knew. And I watched him treat his wife and his kids. And to me, that became the role model. And those things allowed me to learn to love myself, because I would constantly ask myself, what is right about me that Kyle and his family treat me the way that they do? And then I would watch the way he interacted, and I was like, I want to be like that. So how do you learn to love yourself? By looking for the people around you that gift you with love, and then asking yourself, like, what is it about me that is generating people to love me? If you're someone out there that is struggling to love yourself, and you've had the kind of life where you just have no self-worth, no self-value, I want to dedicate this episode to you. I want to dedicate this episode to your beauty and your wonderfulness. I want to help you make a shift. That once you make this shift, you're going to be able to change your life. Once you make this shift, you're going to be able to love yourself, and the consequences of loving yourself are so robust and so profound and so significant. You'll literally never be the same person again. I want to dedicate this episode to those people that are scratching and clawing and fighting to become the best version of themselves. It is incredibly hard to be the best version of yourself if you haven't first learned to love yourself. But I'm going to tell you, like, once you make the shift, regardless of your background, regardless of how people treated you, even if it was your parents and the people that were supposed to love you and be kind to you and be the people in your life that they were supposed to be, You can still do it. And this episode is all about that. This is going to sound crazy, but like a lot of us don't have ideal backgrounds and things in our past. A lot of us have traumas, difficulties, things that we're ashamed of and embarrassed by. But here's the shift that you need to make. You need to love all parts of you. You need to fall in love with you and even your flaws, because your flaws are part of your beauty, part of your essence, part of what makes you you, and it's part of what makes you so valuable. And like everybody else, I spent a lot of my years trying to hide my flaws for fear of judgment, not loving myself, not loving those flaws, not loving the things that I really wish I had loved in me. I spent a lot of those years embarrassed and hiding them. And it wasn't until I realized in my flaws and in the embarrassing parts, that's exactly where my strength lies. I used to hide the fact that my home life was not ideal. I would lie and pretend. People in school, I remember being in college, and I went to college before, Cash App, PayPal, Zelle. Your parents couldn't just instantly send you money. And I had a friend, and his mom would send him stuff. She'd send him cash and a card, once a week. And another friend, his mom was an amazing cook, and she would make meatballs. She would freeze them, and then she would put dry ice in a package and then ship the frozen meatballs. And my friends would ask me, Elliott, how come your parents haven't sent anything? And I wouldn't lie. I'd be like, oh, they did send something. I just came and got it earlier. I got it when I was coming back from class. Oh, Elliott, we haven't seen you. You haven't gotten a letter in a long time. Yeah, no, I got something. I just opened it before you guys got back from your class. I was hiding the fact that my family wasn't conducting themselves the way their families were. I was hiding it. I was totally running from that reality. And it wasn't until I realized that my greatest strength is demonstrated by the fact that I've accomplished hard things in spite of some of my family background. I've accomplished hard things in spite of some of the difficulties and challenges. So in a weird way, those difficulties and challenges became something that I'm very proud of. It became something that I love about my story. And it's weird because I don't love that I went through it, and I wish that I didn't have to go through it. But since I did, I'm so proud of the way that I dealt with it. And I love that this is who I am, regardless of what I had to get through to get here. It means a lot to me that I've been able to become the person I am today, in spite of some of the challenges that I overcame. So if you want to really change your life, if you want to really, really love yourself, you can't just love the good parts and hide the bad parts. You got to love to learn the whole you. And once you do, your life will never be the same. Thanks for being here. If you wouldn't mind doing me a super huge favor, I would love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. And also follow me on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can search for my name, Elliott Connie, or @Elliott Speaks. That's my handle across all platforms. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.